Hey Shubhankar, good to see you.
Hey Jivahn, how are you?
Not bad, I can't complain. How about yourself?
Very well as well. uh, dot on time. That's very
Yeah,
like
I try to be, though I will be honest and say that this is not necessarily a routine occurrence for being on time. But I do try to be because it's good.
all right. Before we start, has anyone told you that you look like the spitting image of Daniel Day-Lewis?
No, they have not actually. I've Daniel Day-Lewis. I did not. That's actually the first time I've got him.
Hang on. Let me just show you. I was looking up your LinkedIn just before starting, just to see like what you've been up to. And look at this. Um, because when you were over at in our OB class a few days ago,
Yeah,
and I couldn't help thinking that you looked so much like Daniel Day-Lewis from There Will Be Blood. Have you seen the movie by any chance?
I have not, but now you've put this on my to watch list. So you asked me that question in about a week, and the answer most likely will be yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. Interesting. Huh. The only one that stands out I've had before is some people said I look like Nick Jonas, apparently. But this is the first time for
Uh,
Daniel Day-Lewis.
Daniel Day-Lewis is
All
the
right. I appreciate it. So,
yeah,
how's the weekend been for you so far?
very hectic. I stay alone. I stay in a flat with a few other people, and so most of the weekend is spent in trying to just do a few admin tasks around the house,
There.
meal prep for the upcoming week, and so yeah, it's
Yeah,
I
that's
just
hard to
got
keep busy.
I just like I woke up at around 7 this morning. I was working throughout the day, and literally just about 30 minutes ago, I quickly had lunch and then sat down.
Yeah, I
Uh,
understand the feeling. I've also
the
gotten
pot.
into a habit where I rarely have more than 2 meals a day. So,
Yeah.
just, yeah, not necessarily good or bad. It's just sort of the rhythm that I've started to adopt.
All right. So do you just have breakfast and dinner, or you skip
Usually
lunch?
it's more lunch and dinner. It really depends. So
Dinner?
because of my tutoring work, I'm working on a hybrid between UK and US hours. So I'm
Yeah.
often waking up a bit later, like at 9 o'clock, and going to bed later, around 1 or 2 o'clock. So as a consequence, usually my first meal of the day ends up being more of an early lunch of some sort, and then dinner.
You tutor people in the US?
Most of them are based in New York, actually, with a few from California at the moment as well.
Okay. And I think you mentioned you do tutoring for SATs. Is that it?
I started out with SATs because it's obviously one of the most highly demanded subjects. I've
Yeah.
since been shifting a lot. So I actually, at this very moment, I don't have any SAT students. I have in the past, of course, but I've mainly been focusing on math and business topics. And so by business, it means accounting, economics, finance, and so on. And I've also been shifting more towards the college level, so undergraduate students pursuing bachelor's degrees, occasionally even master's degrees.
Yeah.
I still have some high school students as well, but I've just started finding that I often work best with older students, with some exceptions. I've had some very young students who are very precocious who I love working with. But
Oh yeah. Well, one of my very close friends, he was I don't know what site he uses, but he tutors young kids. He loves teaching.
nice.
And so he was talking about going into the world of tutoring, and he's like, this is like a nice steady income that you get. And he said it's nice enough to, go for the extra round of drinks at the end of the night, and you know that you have that extra 40 pounds in the back of your pocket. So he's like, yeah, I kind of enjoy that. So he goes out for an extra
Uh,
dinner with his girlfriend every month.
nice.
Because because he's in consulting, he like people reach out to him to help him with their consulting interviews. So it's there's a bit of, I guess, serendipity by being on these
Yeah.
platforms as well. Have you
Yeah,
been
absolutely.
tutoring for long?
I guess technically speaking, I started tutoring about 7 years ago or so when I was in my last year of high school.
Yeah.
And then during all of my undergraduate, I was part of so I went to Princeton and I was part of the Princeton McGraw Center, which is the tutoring agency that is part of Princeton. So I would teach my peers the math and economics courses that I was learning at the same time. Now, obviously, when I say teach my peers, because I was still learning them at the time, in some cases it wasn't so much teach as try and figure this out together and scream in frustration when neither of you can figure it out. But obviously, once I worked on it for a year or two, I started to learn it a lot better. One of
Yeah,
the big things I've found with the tutoring is that you learn a topic so much better when you actually teach it to
yeah,
people. It
definitely.
forces you to think about it in a more structured way.
Yeah,
But I've only been doing it more than just, a few hours a week, sit for about, I guess, 2, 3 years now. So since my last year of undergraduate, I guess a bit more than 3 years now. But yeah, when I went to Imperial, I really started doing it in earnest to support myself alongside the masters.
right,
Obviously, I mean, I was fortunate to get a partial scholarship, but UK
right.
universities are not cheap, and neither is
Oh,
life in London. So, and then I found that I really enjoyed it, and I liked my students. I've been quite fortunate with my selection of students compared to some people that I've heard.
right.
So everything kind of pushed me towards continuing with that.
Oh, okay. That sounds very interesting. So you've been basically maintaining the tutoring thing as a, let's say, a side business sort of a thing where you just get a bit more income and that supplements your, I would say, more entrepreneurial activities.
I'd say it's almost been the opposite at this point. So it's almost more the other activities which supplement my tutoring work.
Oh, all
So I
right.
mean, it's obviously it's so I should prefix that I've got a very weird life situation in that there's really three main projects that I'm working on. I mean, obviously there's a few others, but so the tutoring I would say is one of the biggest ones in
Right.
that so the thing to know about tutoring market is that it's very cyclical because obviously your hours depend on how many tests your students have.
Yeah.
But I'd say right now I'm doing about 25 hours a week of tutoring.
Right.
Then the second big thing in terms of time commitment is the startup work that I'm doing at this AI company. So I'm
Right.
working as a project manager at Productising, which is a French AI startup. It's very small, it's maybe 12 people.
Right.
So I'm working for 12, like 16 to 20 hours a week as a project manager there.
Right.
It's been very fun. It's good. It's cool to learn Python and really be able to apply it to different to like web scraping, to natural language processing, especially for someone who's not a coder by formal training.
Right.
And then the third thing are the startup projects, which is mainly BrainBow, which I talked about at
Yeah.
the lecture at with
Yeah.
Sunkamp at Imperial. But so that's a really cool startup idea that my friend Aziz and I are doing, where we're trying to create a better learning management app and personal development app as well. Obviously, it's in the early stages, so it's not taking up as much of my time proportionally. I'd say I'm usually around maybe 10 hours a week on that
Right.
because of just managing the tech team, etc. But that's been very fascinating to work on as well. Just taking an idea from the start and really implementing it as best you can.
All right. Well, I really like how you structured all your projects into hours and how it totals up to a certain number of hours divided over the week. And then you have, your time for other. I mean, are you the kind of guy who'll like allocate time for like morning walks throughout the week? Stuff like
Excellent
that.
question. I don't allocate time for them, but I definitely go out of my way to make them happen. It's interesting actually. Do you also like walking?
I do. I find that it helps, it stimulates your mind and it helps you think quite a lot. So there are days where I'll be just like sitting in my room, just staring out of the window, and I'll just be seated in one position. And then there are days where I need to think in a different way. So I'll go for a walk for a couple of hours.
It's the same thing on my end where whenever I need to think about something or strategize or plan, I cannot do it sitting down. So, and I mean, even if it's within my house, I mean, if my roommates can testify that occasionally they'll come home and they'll just see some deranged lunatic pacing around in the living room, going in circles, muttering to himself. That lunatic is usually me, but
Yeah.
it's the best way that helps me focus. So,
How do you how do you think? Like if you had to describe a process of thinking, because obviously you're doing a lot of strategic work, whether it's for your company where you're working, the startup, or whether it's for your startup, or whether it's any other idea that you might be thinking of. Because over the last, I would say, since the pandemic hit, I really started paying attention to how I think and how I like what sort of mental models do I implement and how do I collect them in a sense and what kind of biases I might have. And so I'm really fascinated to talk to a lot of entrepreneurs and so what exactly is their process of thinking, whether it's a conscious thing or not, or whether it happens subconsciously.
that's a very, very good question. Obviously, I think it depends on the person. And for me to boil down how I think in general I probably can't give a fair answer because even I don't know all the workings of my own mind. But some of the structures that I do to keep myself focused, number one is on a roughly monthly basis. I usually do a quick evaluation of how I find my life has been going, and give myself some action goals accordingly. So, and these aren't necessarily to do with work. Sometimes it's even saying, I've been working too much. Let me take a bit of time for my friends. Let me
Yeah,
take a bit of time to travel and so on. So, doing a monthly self check-in helps a lot, I would say.
right.
Number two, on a more regular basis, going on walks helps me do the strategizing that I need. Because the third type of thinking that I do is my implementation thinking, where I've just had a tutoring call with someone and I'm going, okay, I need to work on these topics now with them. Let me make sure I'm prepared.
Yeah,
Or working on figuring out how to scrape a website for my startup.
yeah,
Those are things that are more straightforward that you can do in the moment.
yeah,
But when it comes to the more strategizing, saying, okay, am I actually content with where I'm going? Do I anticipate any problems coming up later on that
yeah,
I have to go on walks for?
yeah.
So I don't
And
know
so
if that answers your question.
how often do you find yourself thinking, more strategic, more macro than the day-to-day operational kind of tasks?
It really depends, honestly. Like right now, it's been a bit less so because I've just been getting in the rhythm of the tutoring, the startup work, etc. So I
Yeah,
sort of have a bit of a relaunch at the start of the year. So I'd say maybe, twice a week right now. But there's times in the summer where, once every day or two, I'd just be going on a 30-minute reflective walk to
yeah.
try and cogitate and plan things out.
But that really strikes me as something that's very different because I haven't heard a lot of people speak so cogently about their thought process. I mean, you started off by saying that you might not be able to say some, like, come up with a great answer. But I think that was a great answer, and it really reflects on how you structure your thinking and how you actually develop your thinking as a faculty, because I'm not really sure a lot of people tend to do that these days.
I guess that's fair. I mean, it's easy to get overwhelmed with everything and get carried away in the moment. And I've got to admit, I mean, that's something that affects me also. I mean, I mean, this is what I try to do, and recently I've been fairly successful with it. But it's one of those issues where you always have to sort of be on top of yourself and
Yeah.
keep yourself on track because what was it, about maybe about 2 years ago or so, I sort of got more into this habit where actually before then it was interesting. I almost had the opposite problem where I was thinking too much, where I
Right.
found that I was always going on just reflective walks, cogitating on life and not doing anything.
Right.
And so I almost had to pull myself away from that a bit
Right.
to be a bit more action oriented and just getting things done. So
Right.
it's a work in progress. I feel like all of life is just trying something out, realizing that you've gone too far or it's not working and trying something else and just not getting discouraged through that whole process.
Absolutely. And I was the absolute other way because I was biased to action and then too little thinking. And so that around the time that the pandemic hit, that's when I started, really taking a pause and really I used to do this weird thing where every morning I'd get up really early and I'd just sit in my balcony with a cup of tea and I'd just look outside, look at the trees, look at the birds, and I'd just do nothing. It was basically like my way of trying to ensure that I instill some sort of way that I, set aside time for thinking. Basically, if I wasn't setting aside time for thinking, and I realized that, the entire day goes by, you're either doing work or you're watching Netflix, reading a book, and then when's the time that you really sit with yourself?
That's an excellent idea. That's a very good one, honestly. I guess I don't really do that much now because I normally don't have a balcony, but that's something
You
which
don't
I
have one,
definitely would do when I'm in the mountains. So
yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess it's different for everyone. You have to sort of navigate around your own personality a bit.
yeah,
So
of course. Of
tell me,
course.
tell me about your startup because you spoke about it briefly when you came to our class, and I'm not sure if I understood it completely.
Of course. So I assume you're talking about BrainBow, which is the
Yeah,
startup that I'm creating as opposed to the startup that I'm working
yeah,
for. So it's an idea that we started maybe about a year ago. So it originated from the innovation, entrepreneurship, and management masters at Imperial,
right.
where this good friend of mine, Aziz Churic, who's from
Who
Boston.
can I say, by the way, is an absolute baller. He came to class virtually, and he was on a ship off of, I don't even know where.
Somewhere off the coast of Croatia is where I pinpointed his location.
Yeah, so he was sailing while he was addressing the class.
It just
What
shows
a
his
power move.
dedication. I mean, it's an absolute, I mean, it's both a power move and shows his dedication because,
Yeah.
I mean, it was actually the weekend of his birthday. So he was on a sailing trip around. It's actually his birthday today as I'm talking about it. So
All right.
wishing
Happy
him a
birthday.
pleasant day as he celebrates. But yeah, I mean, he showed up on video call with spotty Wi-Fi in the,
Yeah,
on this ship, this small little boat that he was sailing on with some friends for the
yeah,
lecture. So yeah, so he approached me about, yeah, I guess about a year and a few months ago, saying that
right,
he was wanting to work on a better note-taking app initially.
right.
And this was something that interested me quite a lot because from the internships that I did and from my general learning, I was realizing that there's so many times where I would think of some information that I want to remember, and 90% of the time I don't even type it down. And then
Yeah,
10% of the time I type it down, and 90% of those times I lose track of it.
yeah,
Either I wrote it down on my phone notepad, which is not structured, or on my computer notepad, which I have to look up. So it's clunky. We're not, and the issue for humans is that we're not set up to remember little details in the long run.
yeah,
So what we were thinking about doing is, so we talked to a lot of people that we knew, uh, mainly students and academics, but a few young professionals as well, and tried to ask them about their note-taking habits. And we realized that there was a lot of heterogeneity. There wasn't just one style that people had, but there were a lot of different ways that people used. And so what we are realizing is that, so we've sort of gone on, are trying out a few different routes to test which one is going to be most successful. But one route that we want to go down is creating a portable app that will connect with everything that you have, and your phone, your take pictures, to upload notes from Word, etc., and allow you to manage all of your different note-taking streams in one place. So
yeah,
that way, if I took notes in my notebook during one class and then wrote them down on my computer the next class, I can still integrate them in the same location.
right.
The second way, and this is the one that we're starting to lean towards a bit more, which I'm very interested in, is in more personal development and learning management, where what we're realizing is that a lot of people are wanting to learn more about themselves, work more efficiently, and we're not really taught the structures to do that because there's no one size fit all structure.
I agree.
Like you were just talking, I mean,
Yeah,
you're like, one thing that works very well for you is starting out the day with, looking out on a balcony. I think that would work great for myself as well. But I know some people for whom that would not work very well, and they need
yeah,
to reflect a different way.
yeah,
So what we're wanting to do, and we're still figuring this out, is create a structure that will connect people with learning management resources, with personal development resources, things like
yeah,
personality tests, etc., and give them frameworks that they can use to manage their notes and manage their everyday lives. And at the same time, give them an easy to use app where you can quickly access pages and jot things down.
right.
So obviously this is the long run vision. Right now, the proof of concept version of the app is very, very straightforward. It's just like it's a user-friendly desktop where, well, not even a desktop, but folder structure where you create collections, and then within each collection, you can create topics and write notes on those topics that are color coordinated. But I've already, even this very basic structure, which I'll be honest, we didn't really think would have much use, I've already been finding useful for myself in
Right,
that I've been using it naturally and organically without even trying to test it out.
right.
So one thing that I use it for example, is mistake logging. It's because just like every person on this planet, I make tons of mistakes on a daily basis that I want to remember to improve myself. So I
Yeah,
have one note under my personal development tab where anytime that I mess up on something, I just type it quickly down to remember. And that way I can review it later on. I've
yeah,
also done one for movie recs, which yours is definitely going to be going on. But it's but obviously that's just my structure. There's going to be plenty of different structures that other people will use, and
yeah.
we're going to be learning a lot about this. I think that I'll be able to tell you a lot more interesting insights in maybe a year's time once we've got our first version of the app out and have started to gather user insights.
Yeah, I think you just described like the dream problem that I would like to solve in life. Like if I were to ever start a company, because like self-growth, personal development have been like the core pillars of my life. That's literally what I wrote when I applied to Imperial, when they asked me,
Nice.
like, right, tell us about yourself. Because when I was in high school, I wrote down a list of character traits that I wanted to embody, and every day I would read them before going out of the house, and every day back when I got back home, I would review those traits, and I would write down, like you do with your fault journal, where I went wrong, what happened, and what I could do better. And then it took like 4 years, like all through undergrad. I did it, but then at the end of those 4 years, all that effort resulted in that they became part of me. So then it became like very natural. It became like breathing, and I didn't have to think consciously about whether I'm living up to those ideals. And so that really was a very, very transformative set of years for me. And I really do believe in what you're trying to do. People need help with this, and a lot of times people just don't even know that that's something that they should be paying attention to, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I admire your dedication in doing that during all 4 years of university. That's a lot more. That's I think of it sooner than I started to think about this more consciously. Not that I didn't occasionally, in high school, but
Yeah.
really working on it. Yeah, that's excellent, honestly. It's quite inspirational. So as soon as BrainBow's in a position to start hiring people, you've got yourself a job offer. Though
Thank
obviously I
you.
don't know when that will
Um,
be. So
I mean, I'd love to just work with you. I mean, even without any formal ties. I mean, I think what you're working on is so interesting because, like I said, it's like the work that I feel like I've been building up to do. But I never really thought that even that could be channeled into a company. So kudos to you guys for thinking about it at least.
thank
Um,
you. It's
have
I
have
mean
you received any initial user feedback? You said you were in beta stage,
Oh yeah, we're starting to. So we've got maybe about 10 to 15 people already who have downloaded the app and started playing with it. I
right?
mean, we've already caught a lot of bugs. I mean, this version is not perfect. So for example, there's one fairly important bug where it doesn't, you can delete collections and you can delete notes, but you can't delete topics, which means that once you create a topic, it's sort of stuck there unless you delete the overarching collection.
Right.
Then there's a few user-friendly things where the notes aren't automatically indenting, where the keyboard automatic when you open up a note, the keyboard appears first, which sort of hides the note as opposed to when you click on it. So it's small things like that which we're wanting to take care of from a user
Yeah.
interface point,
Yeah.
which we're making notes of.
Yeah.
Then there's also, but what we're really wanting to learn is what people are using it for. And it's interesting you asked me about this because that's something that in tonight around 10 o'clock, I'm going to be sending out a round of emails to the 10, 15 users of the app to ask them for the detailed feedback on not just what's been good or not, but what have they been using it for?
Yeah.
Because we're obviously, like any startup, we can't go into this knowing what we want. We're almost venturing in the dark and we're just trying to figure out what avenues would people most use this for. So once we talk with these people to get an initial idea of what else people use it for, because obviously Aziz and I have already spoken on that for ourselves, but we need to
Yeah.
have broader understanding.
Right.
Then we'll be able to refocus the app accordingly. And of course, we'll be repeating this process many times. It's
Right.
even after the first round for 15 people, you don't have to have a massive background in stats to know that n equals 15 is not the largest sample size,
Yeah.
but it'll be the starting point. And then I'll be able to tell you much more interesting features or ways we're going to head.
But by the way, I signed up for the beta test too. So when am I getting my to
Oh,
try it
awesome.
out?
Have you already downloaded it? I think
No,
I
there was so when you came over to Imperial, you just sent a QR code in which we had to put in our details.
it might have been that it registered on the MVP one, for which I didn't send out emails yet. You know what? Let me take care of that. I'll add you today before.
Yeah,
So,
great, great.
but
I
yeah,
love
I'll really
that.
appreciate your feedback as well on that. I mean, this is one of those situations where the more people can tell us what's wrong with the app, the better.
Absolutely, I completely agree. Yeah, 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 yeah. I'd love to try it out.
I
And
appreciate it.
so how did you start? So you mentioned that your co-founder, he came up with the idea, and this was about a year ago, you said. And so
Yeah, I
how
guess it was May 2021 or so, something around then.
and so what were the initial discussions like when this was just an idea, and how did you decide to start sort of playing around with it, building on it, and when did you really decide to work on it very, very seriously?
Well, I'd say that the in terms of working on it very, very seriously, I'd say that we were both quite committed to it maybe about 5 months after we started, because
Yeah.
initially we were just experimenting, talking to some users just to have an idea of what we could do.
Right.
I'd say it was really last December that we actually hired a tech team to start developing some initial features
Right.
and started taking it much more, with a clear goal in mind, at least. That being said, the issue that both of us are facing is that we both have other obligations. In that, for
Mhm.
myself, I'm still at a phase in my career where I'm not able to fully dedicate myself to a startup because of financial reasons, of course.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm doing my tutoring work and my AI startup work at the same time. And Aziz also, he's working at his dad's company and is taking over a large part of the leadership there.
Right.
So neither of us has been able to work on it full time, which is the reason it's been going relatively slowly. I mean, we've
Right.
we've made good progress already, but it's not like we're able to completely ditch everything else and dedicate our entire lives to it. But
Yeah.
hopefully, in a year or so, once we have better, once we have a clearer app that's already developed, we'll be able to focus on it more. But yeah,
Right.
in terms of seriousness and commitment, I would say maybe about last December.
I see. And so where do you see the app going forward? So you said that it's something that is going to be primarily like a note-taking tool for yourself, at least the first version of the app.
The very first version is more note-taking learning management. So, but obviously
Do
that's,
you think that's something that you'll be able to put out in a year or so?
hopefully. I mean, probably not, well, definitely not all of the features we'd like to envision, because in the long run, some of the things that at least we have as ideas that we'd like to try out
Yeah.
include number one, social sharing, where you could not only share notes with each other. So I write a history note for my history lesson, I share it with someone, rank or like give proposed notes for topics when there's a lot of traction behind them, but also on the personal development side. So a lot of the times, personal development, like it sounds like what you've done for yourself, just like what I've done for myself, has been a lot more internalized. But what I was realizing is that if I had a friend who asked me for, you know, can you help me change myself as a person? Can you, I'd like to become more assertive, more diplomatic, more conscientious of other people. Can you help me with this in some form? I'd be very happy to. And I was realizing that's something I would love for my friends to help me with. But the issue is that it's a bit awkward to ask that. It's not very culturally. As soon as you say, "Can you help me with personal development?" People, the intuitive instinct is that you're asking for either just validation, yay, Jivahn is great, yay, or you're feeling very insecure about yourself and you think that you're a horrible person, which is not the
Yeah.
case. I
And
think
also
most,
it's a very vulnerable position, even if you're doing it
true.
very honestly for
True.
yourself. It's very
That's true. So
vulnerable to put yourself out like that in front of your friends or your family, like whoever you might be asking for help.
that's true. So it's something where you want to only ask certain people on that. But so we are thinking that there's probably avenues we could take the app on that direction. The second thing that we're also looking into is note integration. So integrating it with other platforms, things like Evernote, things like Word documents, etc.
Right.
Uh, and a third area is largely this personal development side, where just seeing what sort of frameworks, what sort of uh, recommendations we can give people, because we want to help people not just learn, but learn how to learn effectively.
Yeah,
So
right.
all of these things, I have no idea if or when we're going to get them done, but those would probably be, if assuming that we're able to get the basic structure ready within a year, that's where we'll likely be turning our attention to.
Yeah. No, I think those are very lofty goals, but worthy of pursuing because it's funny you mentioned because for the last year, I have been looking for a note-taking solution for myself. I haven't
Yeah.
found it yet.
Okay.
And if you could solve the problem of because I have ideas, I put them in my note-taking app on my phone, and then I have other ideas, I put them on my notebook, and then I have other ideas that I'll put them on a Word doc, and then I forget about them. I just don't have a way to centrally, create a repository unless I'm that meticulous that I, keep track and then put everything and copy paste it into one document.
Yeah.
It tends to get lost. And so if you had something that, integrates like, let's say, three different platforms, let's say these are the three most common platforms that people use to take
Yeah.
notes. inculcate that note-taking habit, that'd be so great. And I'd be your first buyer for sure.
Cheers. Well, we're hoping, I mean, first thing you should know is that anyone who's helping us out with the testing phase will get a free subscription to start out with at the very least.
Yeah.
And even I can't remember, I think Aziz and I were saying like 1 or 2 years a minimum, but regardless, I think we're also going to offer freemium versions. We're still looking into the business plan. We haven't focused on that as much
Yeah.
for the pricing side, because no point in discussing the pricing in too much detail when you don't even know what the final solution looks like.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we I think, at least on my end, and I think Aziz also, we'd like to offer something that people can use regardless of your finances, because learning isn't something that you should have to pay for,
Right.
or at least at the basic level. Some of the more advanced features, obviously, yeah. Actually, there was one other advanced feature we were thinking about including is seeing if we could invent some sort of algorithm or like AI that could study some of the most popular notes and extract what features or structures make them so. Now, this is something that obviously would be a lot more complicated because, and that's something that, even though I've been working in machine learning and AI for the last almost year now,
Right.
I wouldn't know exactly. That would involve a lot of different features, which might be too challenging to set up. But
Right.
that's something else that's a possible avenue in the future.
That's so interesting. It's so interesting what you do. I'm completely intrigued.
Well, cheers. Well, I hope that in a year's time we'll be able to give more concrete things than pure intrigue, but intrigue will suffice for the moment.
Oh yeah, I mean that's how you start out. Have you thought about integrating social media with your apps?
Yes, that is something also, especially when it comes to the like the knowledge sharing phase. If and when we implement the features to share notes, etc., it would be nice to have solutions where you can just post on Instagram, oh, shout out to this note or this author, or even share your own notes to help your peers.
Yeah.
I do think there's a lot to do. There's no point in reinventing the whole wheel on social media when you
Yep.
have all these other solutions out there.
Yeah. And it just struck my mind because I've been trying to grow someone I work with very closely, their personal brand on social media for the better part of the last 1.5 years. And I started posting more regularly on LinkedIn and Twitter over the last, I would say, 6 months as well. And so what I found was a particular pain point was that it's very tough to think of something to write every single day and then post it at a particular time. So then there are these softwares that help you schedule. So you write a batch of content, you write like 6 tweets for the next week, and then you just input them and you schedule them that this tweet will go on Monday at 3 p.m. IST or 3 p.m. London time. And then it goes like that. And then it's just one tool. And then they have these business models where you want to use LinkedIn and Twitter. So you pay a bit more. You want to use Instagram as well. So then they schedule Instagram for you as well. But then basically if your app becomes a place where everyone writes their thoughts down, then it becomes the natural extension that it is connected to their social media, and it helps them disseminate their thoughts much better and makes it more easy. That's like a direct connection that just struck my mind while you were speaking. I don't know if you probably thought of that though.
We didn't think about scheduling things in the same way, or about like the more regular posting and all. So that's definitely a good thought that we should investigate on that. It's also great that you set that up for yourself with posting as well. Social media is something which I'm not that active on. I mean, I have my Instagram account, my old Messenger account, but that's something which for my own personal development, I didn't put this as one of my immediate goals that I wanted to work on, because I had other things that I deemed were more urgent. But that's one of the things which in the short to medium term, I do want to change in myself, is just start to develop more of a presence and, be a bit more comfortable sharing things. So
yeah, because you're such a great speaker. I mean, I remember being so struck by the way that you presented when you came. You've been to our class twice, I think now. And
yes, that's true,
the
actually.
very first time when you came, it was our first week. It was our induction week, and you captured the entire room in a way that I felt that the others did not, and that really speaks very highly of your oration, the way that you convey your thoughts, and I think that you'd be a great addition to people that are already voicing their opinions on social media.
Well, I'm very touched by that. That means a lot. Thank you so much. I hope that's true. Although I also am aware that there's a lot of things I can do to improve my own speaking as well. It's just one of those things in general where no matter how good you get, there's always somewhere better. So
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and you kind of had to say that because, you're making an app around personal development. So, if
that's
there's an end point, then, there's the, what do they say? The CAC, cost of acquisition, and the long-term
oh
value of
yes,
the long-term
exactly.
value of the person who's buying decreases, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, very, very, very good connection there. Um, but yeah, it's just one of those things in general where I feel that we're so used to thinking of I'm going to work on something when I'm bad at it, as opposed to I'm good at something, I want to get even better and just keep shooting as high as you possibly can. So
Yeah. Yeah. I find myself very split on that actually, because, people say that work on your strengths and forget about your weaknesses. But then I really struggle with that. I'm like, no, I want to work on my weaknesses. It's what got me where I am today. So how do I not work on? I know, like, I know. Did you do your personal innovation development module? Did you have that when you
yes,
were in the
yes,
gym?
we had the same thing.
Yeah, and so Michelle Rogan, our professor, she said that she made us do a survey, and then there we were ranked on different criteria, and then she said that out of these five, you work on three, and then just forget about the lowest two. Don't work on them. Work on your strengths. And for some reason, I just had a hard time accepting it. I decided, on the side, I just work on all five by myself, and I'll just report the three.
Nice. That's
Uh,
very commendable.
but it's I don't know. I mean, what do you have any more thoughts around that?
Honestly, I've also struggled with that same issue. I think I've historically been a lot more like you, where I've always focused more on my weaknesses. I've started to find that, I mean, once you sort of bring your weaknesses up to a certain level, that at that point I've started to shift towards let's see if I can play to my strengths a bit more. But I'll be honest, that's something which I don't think there's really a right answer for, because on one hand, your weaknesses are the things that can bring you down if you let them get out of hand. And you always need to be conscious of your weaknesses at the very least.
Yeah,
Then at the same time, you want to make sure that if you have things which you're naturally good at, or which through hard work and dedication you've become good at, you really want to find ways to make those shine and really stand out there. So, and also, I mean, there's also, I don't know if you found this for yourself too, but I found that as a person, my weaknesses and strengths sort of change over time naturally, where there's certain situations where I'm, a weakness is standing out to me as I need to fix this. And then in another context, that weakness either doesn't materialize or is no longer as relevant. And
yeah,
vice versa. There's some cases where I really need to push on the strength, and then it's not useful in another context. So I
yeah,
go more hands off there.
yeah.
So, but yeah, no, I wish I had a perfect method on that. But if I found one, I mean, it would revolutionize all of society in terms of personal development. So I think life is not that easy.
It
But
isn't that easy, and I agree with what you say that there is no end goal. There you just keep going, and you just try and get better every day. That's it. That's the goal, right? You just try and get better every day, and hopefully
and
you get.
enjoy life as you're going along. So
Yeah, and then hopefully, a few years later, you look back and you're like, yeah, I made significant progress. And then, you don't see it every day, but then it compounds over a significant period of time.
exactly. Here's a question for you. Often, I've heard people say both that when you're climbing a mountain, obviously metaphorically, but also practically as well, of course.
Yeah,
When you're climbing a mountain, on one hand, you should always look ahead of you to see how much further up you can go and inspire you to move forward. And on
yeah,
the other hand, you can look behind you to see how far you've come. Which
yeah.
of those do you think makes more sense? Or do you think it's like maybe both?
I think it's both. I think it's also there's a third option. You should be always looking laterally, sideways as well, to see if there's a better route upstairs.
Oh, that's excellent. That's excellent.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm gonna remember that one when I ask that question for people in the future.
yeah,
Yeah, you're right. Because I mean, and actually, it's a good food for thought for myself. Is that while you're looking at where you've come to see what you've developed, while you're looking in front of you to see how much further out you can go, it's
yeah,
also important to keep track of the present and just enjoy the views around you. And from a tactical point of view as well, like you're saying, see if
Yeah.
your goal, the mountain that you're looking for is even the one you want to climb.
Yeah,
So
and because I remember when you said this, I remembered like something I read a while ago where yeah, there's a group of guys who are trying to go up a mountain, and then they decide that this is the best route, and they keep going, and then one of them says, "No, no, no, I think there might be a better way." But they're like, "No, no, no, but we're already halfway up there. Let's go." And so there's that sunk cost fallacy that comes in, and then you're like, "All right, so let's just keep going on the route we are already had," and then they get they get like 25% of the way farther up, and they realize it's a dead end. Meanwhile, the guy who went back around the side, he realizes there's a better way, and he goes up to the top. So it's like it's just like it's just a metaphor for me to keep your mind open at all times. That's it really.
very wise, very wise. No, I'll remember that in my yeah, I'll just remember that for my own life in general.
Yeah, I feel like I could talk to you about personal development for like maybe the next 5 hours and still not be bored.
Same here, same here. It's a fascinating topic and one that is really on my mind, and it's great to meet someone else who's also really interested in that.
Likewise, I haven't met a lot of people like you that I can say, even though our interaction has been just about 40 minutes, I really haven't met a lot of people like you.
I hope in a good way, but
Oh yeah, in a good way, of course.
yes,
I think I might title this video "Mutual Admiration Society."
I like that. I like that. Well, that's a good name.
Yeah. So, how do you pronounce your name again? Is it Jivan?
Jivahn, yeah,
Jivahn Moradian.
exactly.
And you have a very, very interesting background that you briefly mentioned. Yeah, so you're half Indian and half American. Is that right?
Precisely. But I grew up in France.
But you grew up in France, correct? All right. So is your dad Indian or is your mom Indian?
My dad's side. So it's also interesting on his end because although he's Indian, his father is from Iran, and presumably some like a few generations past, we were very confident we have Armenian ancestry as well because our last name Moradian is a very classic Armenian last name.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to ask you about that. It's funny you mentioned Iran because my grandparents they spent a significant amount of time. Even my mother, when she was young, spent a significant amount of time in Iran, and this was just before the Iranian Revolution that happened in the 70s. And so yeah, they remember quite a fair bit of it and very, very fondly, especially the food.
Oh, yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Yeah, the Iranian food is amazing.
Yeah.
But
All right.
yeah, so
So
and
it was
where in India is your family from?
they're basically from North India. So they're originally from Pakistan, and
Okay.
then they during the partition 1947
Yeah,
they migrated to North India in Punjab, and then they settled there. Both my dad and my mother's side.
nice.
Both my grandfathers, paternal and maternal, they both migrated from Pakistan and then settled here in Punjab. And then I was uh, I was born and brought up in different areas of India because my father was in the army, and so we would travel quite a fair bit. And then, but then around 2005, we settled in Delhi, and then I did most of my schooling and undergrad over there.
Nice,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah,
Yeah, Delhi's a cool city. My dad's from Mumbai.
right,
So for anyone listening to this program who's not familiar with Indian geography, which is probably most people who are not from India,
yeah,
Delhi's the capital. It's in the north. Mumbai, it's culturally still more northern than southern, but it's on the west coast in the
yeah,
central part of India.
yeah.
And just as Delhi is the political capital, Mumbai is the financial or commercial capital, and
Right.
Bollywood capital as well, of course, for
Of
movies.
course, yeah. And so did you live in Mumbai for any period of your time of your life?
Interestingly enough, when I was a baby, so from ages 0 to 4, although I was born in the US, when I was 2 months old, we moved to Chennai because my dad's work had took him in there. So
Right.
Indian geography, fact number 3, Chennai is in the south of India, which is very different culturally from the north.
Yeah.
Um, but Mumbai, it's probably the city I feel closest to, just because I've been back, quite a fair few times. I did an internship there for a full summer. It's where I witnessed my first monsoon,
All
at
right.
least as an adult. So, I still feel very connected to the city, even though I haven't been there for about 3 years now.
Mumbai monsoons are more like, you're just submerged underwater for a fair few weeks in the entire year.
Oh, exactly. If there's any city that can claim to be like semi-aquatic, it would definitely be Mumbai.
Yeah, I mean, you just need an Uber boat for those few months because it is terrible, though. It is quite a terrible thing that happens every year.
But it's funny, I find that for myself, this is something that's probably not the most, well, no, it's definitely not the most popular of opinions because most people think I'm crazy to say this, but I actually find myself more alive during thunderstorms or during monsoons, or just, you just sort of feel the power of nature, and you just kind of
No,
recognize both how insignificant you are, but also it keeps things in perspective.
I get what you mean. And of course, as soon as it starts raining, the Indian pastime is to have chai and pakoras. I don't know if you had that at home.
Oh, of course, absolutely. I mean, that being said, I'm also speaking as someone who's only had a few monsoons in my life, so I
Yeah.
still feel the novelty, which makes it more exciting. I'm very confident that if I were to witness it every summer for my entire life, I would, be sick of it. Especially because it does cause significant property damage and even human life damage as well. So
Yeah. And so you said that for the first few years you lived in Chennai, then Mumbai a little bit here and there, and then where
Mumbai was
were
more
you
for
raised mostly?
holidays. Then I was Paris up for all of my schooling up until high school. Then I went to the United States for my undergraduate bachelor's degree. Then I spent a year in London for my master's. And since then, I've sort of been traveling around over the last year, though I'm planning to be based more in Paris for the next year at least.
Yeah.
And in the long run, I'll probably be based more in the US because I would like to go back there, but we'll see where life takes you. I like to think of life a bit like a river where you can steer yourself a little bit with the flow, but it's never a wise idea to fight the current.
Yeah.
And all you can do is just enjoy it as it goes on.
Yeah, yeah. That's very Forrest Gump of you, I would say.
Yes. Although I don't need a box of chocolates, as he would say, but
Yeah, true. Well, I would prefer a box of chocolates over
understandable.
being in the river.
If
Yeah,
I'm being honest with myself, I usually would also. It's just I've
yeah,
been trying to reduce my junk food intake because I get addicted. But
yeah,
um, yeah, if I'm being perfectly sincere, I would probably prefer that too.
yeah. But that what's striking about you is that you've never lived in the States, but yet your accent, the way you speak, your demeanor, it's all very American. And that's something I've noticed about Americans particularly because there's someone in my cohort right now who's just like you. She's French American and she's been raised in Madrid and Paris for the entirety of her life. And yet, if you speak to her, I mean, to an Indian ear, maybe to a Native American, you might sound a bit different. But you guys sound completely American.
Interesting. I mean, in mind, I think part of it is because I did live there for I did my 4 years of undergraduate education in the United States. So I did live there for at least that much time. And then even when I wasn't living there, I'd go there for, most holidays. So my grandparents live in Colorado, which is where I was born, and it was
Right,
very common that I'd go back there for a few months every year. So it
right,
still felt like home nonetheless. In
right.
terms of the accent, I've noticed that as well with some of my American friends, at least. I think it's just because when you're brought up, my mom was American and she was the one who spoke the most to me. My dad, being Indian, he doesn't have the most French or British accent. I guess it's probably because of him that I can put on an adequate Indian accent, but it's not my natural way of speaking.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess it's just through
Can
that and through
can we
the
hear it?
sorry.
Can we hear it?
No, not now. It's also, I should also say, I mean, just like in the Indian accent, it's one that's perfect that makes any American or French person convinced. But obviously, then for an Indian at the same time, it's a bit
Yeah.
trickier. Also because there's so many different varieties of accents within India as well. So
Yeah. I feel like people these days just don't want to try it out for the fear of, offending someone. And then when they're very comfortable, then they just end up sounding like Apu from The Simpsons.
that is true. The main reason for mine is because I found that I can't really do it on demand as well. Or anytime that I've tried doing it on demand, it feels a bit forced. But then there have been times in my life where it's actually two main situations. Number one is when I'm in a group of Indians who are, who even when they're not speaking with accents, I'll sort of have a more Indian like rhythm.
Yeah.
And the second case is when I get like upset or angry. Sometimes, at least people have told me that I start to sound a little bit it brings out my Indian side for some reason. I guess it's just the emotion, but
All right, all right. Okay, cool. So you speak French and you speak English. Do you also speak a bit of Hindi?
a little bit. My dad never taught me when I was a kid, so I've been trying to teach myself. Pretty much all I can say is "Meri Hindi kharab hai" and insult people because, of course, those are the essentials when learning any
Those,
language.
you don't need much else. You can get by in North India with just the insults.
That is true. That is very true.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's very cool that you are teaching yourself Hindi.
Well, I mean, it's also when I say a work in progress, I'd almost say it's a work in regress in this situation because I haven't had the time to work on it recently.
Yeah,
But it's definitely one of my long-term goals is to get at least, passably conversant in Hindi.
yeah.
But what about
So
yourself? I imagine Hindi if you were from Delhi for a good amount of time, but
yeah,
any
yeah,
other
yeah.
languages?
I mean, yeah, I speak Hindi. That's the language I grew up with, and English, and then I understand a bit of the dialects. Like I understand Marathi, that's spoken in
Nice.
Maharashtra, because my best friend is from Maharashtra, and so I, for the last many years, I've heard Marathi like every other day, and so that's that. And I understand a bit of Bengali, a bit of Punjabi, quite a bit, because that's where most of my family is from. So yeah, but they're like very closely related, like close siblings of Hindi.
True, but
Uh,
there's still different languages. I mean, it's like English and French and Spanish, where there's a lot of words that are similar and you can kind of understand it when you read it. But
when you
um,
read it, yes, but when you hear it, I actually took French for about 3 years in middle school,
nice,
and I loved studying it. I loved studying it, but couldn't continue with it for some reason. So yeah,
fair enough. Yeah, French is a tough language to learn. They have a lot of exceptions, and then exceptions to the exceptions and all.
they do. So you've been like all over the globe. You've fairly traveled quite well. So which place really feels like home to you? Is
Oof.
it the States?
Probably the States, with Paris being a very, very close second.
Right.
I'd say that as a city, Paris would feel like home because it's where I grew up. My parents still live there, and I have a lot of friends who are based there. But I think culturally, I still feel more American, and it's quite interesting because even though I love France so much, I think there's just part of me that's always felt a little bit more connected to the US.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is also just due to the fact that I sound American. Just the
Yeah.
fact that I sound American when I speak in French, I'm fluent, pretty much bilingual, but I still have a bit of an accent when
Right.
just small things like that that make you feel more connected. And the United States is a country where even though it has so many issues, of course, just like any country, it's also got so much good in it and can stand for so much good as well
Yeah.
that it's definitely a country that I mean it's interesting because culturally I'd say I almost feel more connected to India, like between France and the US, just
Right.
because I also feel just that connection to India and the vibrancy and the potential the country has. So
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Cool. So what's your sort of long-term goal? Like, what are you looking for in life? And not just, related to your startup or just professional life, just like everything. Like when you look back at yourself, you're 80, what kind of life would you like to lead?
excellent question. Very, very good question. So I'd say in terms of my long-term plans at the moment, over the next 5 to 10, maybe even 15 years, I would like to stay in the business world. Ideally, so whether that's a mixture of working in companies in leadership positions, turn them around, that would be cool. But I think what most interests me is starting something on my own.
Right.
So BrainBow is a likely target for that, but there's more ideas out there as well. Who knows? I mean, I'm fingers crossed BrainBow will be the thing that I dedicate most of my life to, or
Yeah.
most of my upcoming life to.
Yeah.
But you never know. So I'd like to stay in the corporate world, ideally create some sort of product, service, solution that really changes people's lives, and ideally scale it down to the point where it's cost effective for most people. Because I've got nothing against making products that help wealthy people, but in the long run, I want to be able to impact low income people, underprivileged people, people in developing countries who can't necessarily afford a lot of the solutions you have. when you're wealthy.
Yeah.
Um, After that, I'd be curious to go into politics, because I also see that there's so much change that can be affected there. And that given the less than stellar intellectual capacity of many of our current politicians, I think is something that we need to really revolutionize. Um, but the reasons I'm not entirely sure I want to go behind that. First of all, I would need to change myself a lot as a person before feeling like I'm in a position where I'm, a good person for that kind of environment. Second of all, I would need to have the networks and all in place for me to feel that I could actually achieve something there and uh, have a bigger impact than the business world, which I don't think is currently the case.
Yeah.
And thirdly, most importantly, be confident that I don't lose myself as a person in that, because the saying, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. The
Yeah.
higher a position of influence you have, the more careful you have to be about yourself. And
Yeah.
I would need to be 100% confident that I would not, that I would not lose myself as I'm going into this kind of world. So that's a tentative idea. But so anyway, so for the near future, to answer your question, just mainly focusing in the business world and startups.
All right. All right. Yeah. It sounds like quite a plan.
Well,
Um,
it's a plan that involves a lot of improvising,
yeah.
because it's hard to plan these things out in the long run. But that's at least my general vision for where I'd like my life to go.
Yeah. All right. And so what do you think? Do you think you're going to be in Europe for the next few years while you're working on BrainBow?
Definitely for the next 1 to 3 years. I think probably in around 2, 3 years or so, I might start shifting
Mhm.
back to the States.
Right.
But I also don't know. I mean, France is a lovely country as well. So is the UK. And I love both countries and have so many good friends in both countries
Yeah.
that I could see myself staying there for longer as well.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. So when are you coming back to Imperial then next?
Good question. I'm not sure. I'll be in London for the next few weeks, so happy to meet up anytime between now and end of October. After that, we'll see. I don't know how long I'll be in London before heading back to France, but
Yeah.
I'll definitely be coming by every now and again. And it does not take too much to persuade me to come to Imperial, because I've got good memories of the school and of the people. So, and
Yeah.
especially of IEM classes, people like yourself and I'm sure your classmates as well, are really, I mean, like the fact that you're organizing this kind of podcast and, I mean, the level of depth that you're putting for your own future as well. I mean, these are the people I want to surround myself with. So,
Likewise, I mean, this is the whole reason why I came to Imperial. I wanted to meet people like you, Ivan, and the podcast is just a small way of doing that. Just a small way of getting to know people like you even better.
well, cheers.
Yeah. All right. Well, this was great. Thank you so much for coming on. This is the third episode or the fourth one that I recorded so far. So I hope to release it very, very soon. And
Sounds good. Yeah. And I hope it's the third or fourth of many.
oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for the good wishes. It was great talking to you.
Same here, Shubhankar.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hope to see you again soon in person.
Yeah. We're gonna hang out. We're gonna be friends. I
Agreed.
know it.
All right. Take care.
Bye, Jivan. Take care. Have a good day. Bye
Same to
bye.
you.